Hi, this is Ron Ball, and I am welcoming you to a new edition of Choose Greatness, your key to a happier, better, greater life. I am very excited about the response we are getting to this program. It is amazing. We hear from people all over the United States, and I want you to be one of those people. Please contact us. Let me know what you think. Let me know what you like. Let me know who you like, because we are tailoring this show just for you, just for your family. This is your program. So tell all your friends, go on social media, start texting right now. If you prefer to call, you could be a little old-fashioned, that's fine. Call somebody. Just get the job done and alert all your family and all your friends that Choose Greatness is back on the air right now. Now, I have a very, very special guest today, a man I have known for a number of years, a good friend, and I've known his family, his mom and his dad, and I have asked him to be on this program because he has been part of the process of building businesses for thousands of people, particularly in the Latin world. And I know that many of you are self-employed or work for someone, but you have a dream of something bigger and better for your own life. Well, this is going to be a program for you. You're going to love this program because God wants to give you insight and information that will give you a way to build your dream. Now, my guest today is Ken Woods. Ken, thank you for being on.
Thanks, Ron.
And we have known each other for a while now.
We have.
And Ken has a few advantages over me. He's younger and he's taller. And he has more hair. So he's a good friend in spite of all those three things. And I have a lot of respect for him. And I wanted him to be a part of this because I am emphasizing for the next 3 programs how families build businesses together. Now, you may not choose to do this, but then again, this may be exactly what you hope to do. Well, you're going to learn a lot today, whether you're building a business of yourself, for yourself or not. You're going to learn a great deal about how it's done. Now, the way I know Ken is through our mutual involvement in the Amway business. Now, many of you know that I have spoken for Amway conventions for a lot of years now. In fact, at last count, my office calculated that I've spoken live to over 8 million people in these conventions over the last number of years. Thanks for the wow, Ken. Wow. Thank you very much. I wowed as well. And was so blessed by that because God gave the opportunity. I was nobody, doing very little, when a wonderful friend named Dexter Yeager kind of picked me out of zero, nothing, and gave me an opportunity to start speaking to his organization. And you actually are in that organization, in one of the legs, as they're called. So Ken has grown up with this business. Now, I know that you want your children to understand economics, business, and business mastery. So this is the guy. This is who you need to hear from today because he grew up with it. He experienced it. And there's no substitute for experience. He's got it. So, Ken, we're going to get started. What I want to do is I want you to get us kicked off by talking about your mom and dad. And I know them, of course, and love your dad. He's a good leader. And he's done a great job, and he's done it from a Christian base and a Christian perspective. So let's just give our viewers some family history. If you ever want to address them, it's right over there. You can just look them right in the eye, and just tell us about your family and how your dad started his Amway business, and how it, kind of the early challenges. Kind of give us the ups and downs, okay? Kind of give us a full view of what it was like in those early years.
Okay, thanks, and thanks for having me.
You're welcome.
I appreciate it. Well, you know, I think for us, we actually started our Amway business, which is like any other business. You know, it's like any other, not just direct selling or multi-level marketing, but it's like being an entrepreneur in any way. And that started in Miami for us, actually, in the early 80s. My dad was a police pilot.
A police pilot?
He was a pilot. So
I knew he was a policeman. I didn't know he was a police pilot.
He was. So he was a policeman in Miami. And they had a helicopter team or helicopter force, and so he flew the helicopter and the aircraft. And this was back in the early '80s when a lot of drug smuggling and all that type of stuff was going on. So he was introduced to this business from another pilot who was a friend, showed him the business over a cup of coffee at the airport, and they got started. It was actually, he had actually seen the business a couple times before by other people.
Most people have.
Yep. And so he saw this business, and because of the relationship they had as pilots, the professionalism they had with one another, he took it seriously, and he said, you know what, this is something I'm going to try. And so he and my mom got started. I was 10 years old at the time. And you know, when they got going, they had all the normal issues that you have when starting a business. Not enough time, you know, not enough money, no experience, but they were motivated because I have a younger brother. He's about, I think, 4 years younger than me, and he was born premature. And this was in the early 70s, or mid 70s when he was born. And so he had a lot of health problems. And so he was a very expensive child. And so
more than you, right?
Yes, right. And so what happened was that was their need, right? So they were hungry. They were looking for something because they needed to make some more money. What he was making as a pilot was not enough to cover all these medical bills and the future bills that they were expecting for treatments and other things. And so they got going, and you know, they found themselves out of their comfort zone. They had to learn something totally different than flying a helicopter or flying an airplane, and they developed that, right, over time, and they just stuck with it. And it was interesting growing up in a household like that because my dad was really busy. So he was up early every morning, off to work, flying his shift, whatever he was doing, if it was daytime or nighttime. And you know, I was a little kid going to school. My mom was a stay-at-home mom, and helping out mostly, I think, because of my brother needing all this extra attention as a little kid. And so we got started.
Well, now, did your mom and dad ever talk? And you were 10 years old, which is a young age.
Sure.
Did they ever talk to you about their challenges, or ever tell you, you know, we're going to be away some, this is our future? Did they ever kind of bring you into that world at all?
You know, at first I didn't know it, right? At first, you know, if you're starting a part-time business like an Amway business, you know, they're working. It's like a second career, right? So after you do your day job, then you go to do something else. And so sometimes he would just go off to show the business opportunity or something to other people in the evening, sometimes by himself or with my mom. And then I'd be alone with a babysitter, right? Or something like that until we reached an age where then, you know, my brother and I just took care of ourselves for a couple hours while they were gone.
Now, was there an age when he started to involve you in the business, helping him?
Yes, from a very early age, I was helping. You know, we had at the time, you know, the business has changed a lot, and we no longer really have product inventory at home, that sort of thing anymore, because stuff can be shipped so easily. But early on, we did, and we had products in our garage, and
So he put you to work.
We did. So stuff would come in. I would pack shelves, and I would help take stuff to people's cars. When I reached the age where I could drive, then I was taking big shipments to UPS and shipping stuff all over the country.
What was your perspective on that? Was that a good time for you? Was that did you understand it enough to appreciate that you were part of the team, or how did that work?
You know what? In the beginning, I really didn't. I didn't understand it.
That's pretty normal.
Yeah, I didn't really. You know, I understood that this was a way to make money, and sometimes we took some interesting trips. You know, went to some neat places, neat hotels and resorts for conventions and things like that. But I didn't really have a good perspective on that in the beginning. But you know, fortunately, I was the child and they were the parents, right? So they knew what they were doing and where they were going. But we still spent a lot of time together doing different things, fishing and, you know, different activities like that.
At what point did you really understand their motivation and why they were doing this kind of business? In other words, at what point did this start to make sense to you?
Wow. So, you know, that's kind of a multi-step answer, I think. You know, I understood from the beginning that what they were doing was trying to build a future outside of police work and outside of something normal. And they were doing it as a family. We were as a family. And it was interesting because my parents were really doing something together as a couple. And that was very different than most people I knew. Because most people, the mom or dad went to work or both went to work and they went different places. They came home, they were tired, and you know, they weren't connected, right? And our family was different because they did it together. So that was something that was neat for me, and I saw that was unique.
That was a positive.
That was a big positive because I saw my parents building something together. And that has always stuck with me. They also had a different kind of attitude about helping other people. You know, it's a multi-level marketing, direct sales is a people business. And so they were always helping other people to achieve their goals and do things like that. And that was exciting for me because, you know, you got a chance to see success.
Right.
And so that was neat. But I don't think that I really understood it until after I left home, until after I graduated from high school, went off to college, and, you know, and then started, you know, working into a career of my own and outside of the Amway business, and then realized, wow, this was really something different.
Something good, different.
Something positive. Because, you know, when you're younger, especially going into high school age, you know, that sort of thing, what you see is the work.
Right.
Right? So you see the effort involved, you see the time being put into, you know, to being successful at something.
Right.
And so that had its ups and downs for me, right?
You see the price before you see the reward.
Exactly right. You know, there is definitely a sowing that has to occur before the harvest. You know, there's no doubt.
That is well said. And I want our viewers to really key on what Ken just mentioned, that there's a sowing before you reap, because there are many studies that are coming out, and this has been true for about 6 years now, about this whole generation of young men and women that we're currently seeing come up has largely a sense of entitlement. That, for example, I talked to the president of a company just days ago who told me that every young man and every young woman they hire right out of college wants to be the head of the company within 1 year. They don't want to spend 10 or 20 years on a career track. They don't want to pay that kind of a price. They want very fast gratification. And because of that, there's a tremendous amount of mobility in business right now. Young men and women jump from one job to another very fast. But your parents stuck with Amway. They must have liked it. What do you think, looking back on it now, other than money, because they made some money, obviously, they wouldn't have stuck with it.
Right.
Other than making money and taking care of your more expensive sibling,
Right.
Other than that, what were the most positive personal benefits they got out of doing a business like that? What did they get out of it other than money?
I think a couple things jump out at me. One is to be able to do something together.
Boy, a lot of husbands and wives would love that. Go ahead.
No doubt. The other thing is they understood that this was an opportunity for personal development. And you know, and that's something that I think transcends even the past to now. You know, a big selling point today of being an entrepreneur and going into business for yourself is you understand that you have to learn and you have to develop yourself. That none of us have the skills we need in the beginning to be successful at anything. You have to work at it, and it takes time. And so that process, I think, it was important to my parents. They saw the value of that, and they saw the value of helping other people to succeed. Not just building something just for themselves.
So it helped them to give to other people.
It did.
So it was very fulfilling, very satisfying, because they were doing something that made a difference for other people as well.
Absolutely, and they saw the change that was happening in my brother and I, that we became a product of the system, if you will. It's kind
in what way? This is a great point. This affected their children. How?
So what I would say is, when you see your parents growing, and you see them changing, and you see them reading books to better themselves and growing through tough times, what you see is that's not an easy process, you know. And you see and so when you watch the struggle, you get a chance to benefit from seeing somebody change.
So you changed watching this.
Yes, and you learn, right? So I got a chance to see, wow, this is what it takes to succeed. It doesn't mean that you, just because you want to succeed, that you will. It means you have to work at something. And so I benefited from understanding that regular people can become good at anything if they apply themselves and they're willing to change and willing to work.
That's an interesting way you put that. Regular people. Now, who's not a regular person? At least in the beginning, right?
Right.
I mean, that's all inclusive.
Yeah.
I came across a fascinating study a while back, and I want to get your response to this. This was a study of Roman Catholic nuns in Minnesota. The study was actually done by a professor at the University of Kentucky. And this professor was so fascinated by the development of these nuns, he actually went and interviewed them. This is a whole colony of Roman Catholic nuns in Minnesota, been there for decades. What he wanted to find out was the answer to one question. Here were these nuns, 80 and 90, a couple of them 100 years old, but they were mentally dynamic. They were vibrant. They were doing new things continually. Well, he was curious. He wanted to know, well, what's the explanation for this? So we went and interviewed a number of these nuns, and what he found out was that when these nuns actually, when they died, they had given permission, because other people were curious about them as well, because they were so mentally sharp at that age, that they had given permission for brain autopsies after they died. And the brain autopsies revealed that these nuns typically had brains that were more typical of a 30-year-old woman.
Wow.
Now, why is that? Well, this was the amazing answer. He found that they were so committed to what you just said, personal development, personal improvement, that every single year they stretched themselves and they continued out of their comfort zone. You used that term a moment ago. I like that. And they continued to expand. They did everything from crossword puzzles. One group of them, who were 82 and 83 years of age, decided that they had never read Russian literature. So they decided to study Russian literature. But they wanted to really study Russian literature, so at 82 and 83 years of age, they taught themselves Russian, a really hard language, so they could do these studies. Well, these women were not only mentally sharp, their bodies responded. They were in incredible physical condition because they continued to develop. I mean, how many people are dead at 30 or 40 because they just stopped? Well, it sounds to me that doing this kind of stretching business benefited your parents in that sense too. Am I right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. So, you know, that's an interesting study. It doesn't really surprise me from the background of our family business.
You've seen things like that.
Because I've seen it happen where, you know, people who, you know, so here's what happens in life, right? So you go out, you go to school, you get a career, you start to get into your career, and sometimes people get bogged down with life, right?
Easily and quickly.
Yes, they have obligations, mortgages, car payments, you know, debt because they maybe spend too much or they don't make enough to make it all happen, and they then try to figure out, okay, well, how do I fix this solution? Or, you know, find a solution to this problem, and most people don't. Most people don't. They just continue to get weighted down by all of this. They don't necessarily have a good faith to lean on. They don't have great relationships. Mm-hmm. And so they just get more and more enclosed until somebody maybe offers them an opportunity or they have a change in life.
In this case, it was a financial motivation because of your brother,
yes.
But it also brought them into a whole new world.
Yes, exactly. And so then they developed new friends, right? New influences, a new community to be a part of. And they started to expand their horizons. You know? Well,
Ken, you mentioned your dad coming from a police background. I read an interview this week from a retired police detective. He'd been in the force for 35, 40 years, so he had retired after lots of experience. And he said that he used to feel very frustrated dealing particularly with people from the inner city. Mm-hmm. Not a put down of them, but he just became very frustrated because he said he would meet young men and young women who were 20 and 25 years of age. He said he would see those same young men and young women 10 years, 20, 30 years later. Now, this is his terminology, and I'm not trying to be negative or harsh. This is what he said in the interview. He said, it used to so frustrate me because he said, I watched them live good-for-nothing lives. Mm. And he said, I didn't know how to help them. Good. Now, that sounds like a criticism. I understand. But that was his experience with these people, these young men, young women. He said they just lived 20, 30, 40, 50 years of good-for-nothing lives. Well, one thing I've learned with the Amway business is that it kind of shakes you out of that. Because the only way that you can develop a personal business of that nature, and I've spoken to many groups, some in your organization, sure, and always loved it because these people are hungry, yep, and they want to learn. And you mentioned your mom and dad reading new books and stretching, and
sure,
did they ever have you read anything?
They did. They did.
Give me an example.
You know, so when I was a teenager, I read a classic book that they encouraged me to read, How to Win Friends and Influence People.
Dale Carnegie,
Yes.
yep.
And Magic of Thinking Big.
I knew you were going to say that one because that's one of my favorites in the business, The Magic of Thinking Big.
Yep. And so books like that, and there are so many that are out there now, and new ones. You know, I'm reading one right now that's great. But what happens is well, you know, and you know this, I probably heard you say it from a stage at one point, which is, you know, you learn two ways. You can learn from your own mistakes, and you can learn from the mistakes of others. And what reading books allows you to do is have a greater experience in life without having to go through all those issues yourself.
Well, reading is actually a shortcut to life experience.
Yep.
Because if you read all these books, you're learning what other people have experienced, and if you pay attention and you absorb those lessons, it can accelerate your progress, which is very exciting. And I want to say something to all our viewers. I want you to encourage your children to read. Now, you say, well, I can't compete with video games. I can't compete with mass media. I can't compete with sporting events. But really, if you can teach your children to read, you can help them become critical thinkers. You can make them leaders beyond most of their peer group, their generation. And when you do that, you have given your children one of the most vital tools of success. I don't know if you remember Charlie Tremendous Jones,
Sure.
the motivational speaker.
Absolutely.
He used to famously say that readers are leaders,
Absolutely.
and leaders are readers. And I know your kids, those of you watching, this may be a real difficult thing because they associate reading with schoolwork and responsibility. So maybe start them with something fun. Start them with maybe some positive Christian fiction, something they will like that has some life lessons in it. But let me encourage you to learn Ken's lesson because his mom and dad, did you notice that? Encouraged him to read good books that stretched him as well. Now, say something about your mom and dad spiritually. Give me an idea of what your life was like, because they were Christians building a business. How did that influence their business building?
Well, I think, you know, part of that was the community they associated with. You know, one of the reasons that they wanted to start the business was they wanted to make enough extra money to put my brother and I into a small Christian school. And so we did that in middle school is when it was.
Right.
And that was really important to them. You know, I didn't understand the reason that was important, but you know, they did. They had a focus on wanting to influence my worldview, right? Mm-hmm. And wanting to influence who I associated with. And so that was a big part of you know, something that was important to them. Right. And you know, with their faith, what I saw is that you know, they were busy people, and we didn't always go to church, and we sometimes found different churches we were a part of. But what they started to, you know, instill in me was this whole idea that you need to be under authority.
Now say that again.
That you need to be under authority.
How interesting. Explain that to me. What do they mean by that?
That, you know, that as people, you know, we're not in charge, you know, that life doesn't revolve around us.
It's not just me.
Exactly, exactly. And so our Christian faith was very important to us as a family. And, you know, for personal reasons, for our spiritual faith, as well as business principles. Just in understanding how to treat other people, right, and how to live a life, and that what we are doing here is not the end. You know.
See, I love that. You see, you remember the word intentional. We've used it on this show before. Doing things on purpose. That's what your parents did.
Absolutely.
They meant to instill these things in you. This was not some throwaway, accidental process. They meant for you to learn these things.
Absolutely.
So they intended this. And when Ken mentions being under authority, remember this, there are so many people who rebel against any kind of authority because it violates their sense of their own self-purpose, their own self-identity. They don't want anybody to interfere with who they think they are. You remember one of the giant leaders of the Amway business, Bill Britt. I was with him in his home once here in Florida, and he said, you know, Ron, he said that one of the hardest things I've had to do with men in building the Amway business, he built a big business. Mm-hmm. One of the hardest things I've had to do is teach these men to be teachable, to be willing to humble themselves because they want to be big and tough. They don't need to learn anything. I had a person come to me just recently and say, my husband doesn't want to learn anything about having a better marriage. And I knew the guy was a golfer. So I said, well, does your husband take golf lessons? All the time. I said, is that more important than learning about his marriage? And she said, I'm going to tell him that. And I think she did nicely because he responded well. But the point is, you became teachable because your parents intended for you to be teachable. And I think that's very good. Ken, we want you to come back. We'll do another show, okay?
Great.
Because I've got some real specific questions to ask you because I want our viewers to know that Ken works with a business group, a big business group, that is very dynamic in the Latin world. And many of you are individuals with family members in South America and the Caribbean, different countries that feed into your life experience. We're going to talk about that at our next program. And before we do that, let me encourage you again to go today, right now, to choosegreatness.com. Choosegreatness.com. And I want you to get 2 resources. The book, Choose Greatness, it's in English and Spanish. Choose Greatness, a book written for everybody, every age level. Very simple, very powerful, deliberately organized so that anybody can understand the great success principles that build a great life. It's all in that book, very easy to read. And then I want you to get the audio set, The Success Test. That's an opportunity to learn about yourself, what makes you tick, how you can be better. It's an amazing resource, The Success Test. Get it today. Now, I'm very excited. Tell your friends, come to the next show. You can't miss it. And whatever you do, choose greatness.